intro you a little bit better than and we're live. Cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. My name is Dr. Christopher Salute. I am your host here. I'm going to, if you see me, you know what I'm doing. I'm always sharing my, my show with everyone. I want to make sure everyone can see it. I'm sharing it right now. And we've got a good, not just a good friend, but an old friend, good buddy of mine, Keith Van Wickler, on with us today. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about physical health. We're going to talk about all the great things that, I think that you guys will really enjoy. Keith and I have known each other. Keith, when did we meet?
I was actually thinking about this today. I mean, we would have met in 7th grade.
Right.
We started really hanging out in like 8th grade or so. And at the time, it was WWF figures and the little skateboard things and that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's been a long time.
Absolutely. I just realized I shared this in a professional group that is with a bunch of teachers, so I'm probably not going to – let me delete that one. So I'm really bad at – hold on one second. I want to make sure I do this right. Hold on. Yeah. Nevada Teaching Corps. So I'm really bad, Keith, at introing people, and I'll be honest, I could probably do a better job with you. But for anybody who knows me, I have friends all over the country, and Keith is one of my best and one of my oldest friends from a long time ago. But I feel like you've done so much in the past couple of years that I don't even know how to intro you. So I'll do my best, and then I'll be honest. I mean, I think that you're better off introing yourself. So I've known Keith since, like we said, 7th grade. Started really getting together in 9th grade. Keith has always been a physically fit guy, a physically healthy guy. We've always been able to have conversations about mental and physical health, especially mental health together. I think we've both kind of suffered from, whether it be anxiety or depression or all sorts of other things. So I want to end it there because I know you've got a really successful CrossFit practice. You've got some brands you work with. I don't know them well enough to say this is who you are. So let me end that and you tell everybody what you've been up to.
Yeah. So, like I said, currently I'm at CrossFit South Brooklyn, which is obviously in Brooklyn, New York. I've been working there for about 2.5 years. And most recently before that, I was at CrossFit Island Park, which is out in Long Island where we're from, close by. And while I was there, a company called Active Life RX developed alongside the gym that is definitely related. So I continue to do some work with them as well.
Yeah.
It's more of a remote company as opposed to a brick and mortar kind of gym location kind of thing. So those are the two things mainly that I'm doing at the moment.
Awesome. So now I want to jump right in. One of the reasons I've wanted to have you on, Keith, for some time, and for anybody, from what I understand, there are a lot of folks in Keith's community who are going to be joining, and we're super excited to have you. If this is your first time, this is the Barbershop Show, and the Barbershop Show is really all about men being men. But in 2020, I think men are a little different, right? So in 2020, I think that men can be open about mental health, physical health, love for one another, partnership, things of that nature. And this is something that we don't talk about. And the reason the barbershop came along is I was in a barbershop once a couple of years ago, and I had somebody tell me that I never met him in my life. He had 2 different therapists to help him deal with his current partner. He, had a mental health breakdown. I mean, these are not things that you tell somebody that you're even that close with, let alone a stranger at a barbershop.
Right.
So the reason that I brought Keith on is because I saw your post a couple of weeks ago, and I've always said to you, and we even exchanged some emails about some cool topics back and forth. I've always said to you, Keith, we are on similar vibes, and I was feeling something very, very unique, and you said it right there in that post. And rather than me try to butcher it, can you tell us a little bit about that social media post you put up?
Yeah, so it was kind of right after the COVID, lockdown started, at least here in New York. So about 6 weeks ago at this point. And it's something that I've been thinking about and speaking with a few colleagues of mine about as well in recent months, and stuff that had kind of come up in my own kind of self-care and mental health practices and stuff like that. And it just came from a place of, hearing from a lot of people, particularly guys, being like, okay, what am I supposed to do in this situation? Feeling the pressure of having to stand, especially if they had families, feeling the pressure of having to be there for their family, and how could they best do that to protect their loved ones and themselves as well. And just kind of going along with, societal expectations and the things that we learn as males growing up. I see a lot of, especially as of late, a lot of female-based. How can females best deal with what society puts on them? And they absolutely have specific things that they go through, and oppressive things that they have to deal with that we don't. But simultaneously, not to compete, but they're just different things that we as guys go through. So I think where it's coming from is reaching out to guys specifically, and the expectation that we're supposed to just grin and bear it and be tough guys and not feel confused, scared, overwhelmed, anxious about what's going on right now, and just the effect that can have, and just kind of using this quarantine or this lockdown as kind of, a microcosm for how we're taught to handle life in general. When we experience challenges, when we experience failure, when we experience fear or difficult times, we're taught from day one, don't get upset, just be a man, which was kind of the tagline of my post, and just grin and bear it and just tough it out, and whatever you're feeling, just figure out a way to stuff it down and numb it and keep moving forward. And that's what we learn how to do. And just the kind of the negative effects that can have. So kind of the timeliness of the post was just urging guys specifically to be like, yo, this is a really messed up situation. This is essentially a trauma that we're going through right now. So you have to allow yourself to feel that. Not only should you, but you kind of owe it to yourself to sit and feel scared, sit and feel confused and overwhelmed and all of those things, and just feel them. And, don't let them control you, but, accept that they're real and that it's okay and it's human to feel them. And that will better equip you to handle them going forward. And that's kind of the gist of it.
I completely agree with you, 1,000%. And I loved everything about that post. I thought it was super valuable. And it's interesting, hearing you. I lowered my volume, by the way. Can you hear me?
I just put mine down a little bit too, but yeah.
Okay,
good.
Cool. It's interesting hearing, and again, I haven't seen you, Keith. I left New York about a little less than a year ago, but we just haven't crossed paths in a little bit.
Yeah.
To hear you use phrases like self-care and things of that nature, I mean, that's very much what my brand is all about. So it's cool that we're kind of in that same mirrored path. I want to hit a couple of things. Number one, we can move through. Number one is, you talk about be a man, and I'd like to think that you and I had a similar childhood. My dad's an awesome dad. He's a freaking amazing dad. Yeah. My dad came from Brooklyn, right? Yeah. Brooklyn, New York, plumber, ran a bread route, and to him, we've had some struggles where we speak emotionally, but to him, even though he's come leaps and bounds on his sensitivity, I would imagine that my upbringing was a similar to yours, and that's kind of where that be a man came from. Where did your kind of be a man attitude come from?
Yeah, it's I recognize the same thing and with your dad that you're explaining, and same thing. My father started as an electrician, was a blue collar worker, and a lot of guys that I talk to have the same experience where our generation and a lot of this is learned across generations and is passed down from generations. Like you could think about your grandfather, or any of us could think about our grandfathers and what they may have been like trying to communicate emotions to their son, and then going even further back in the generations, that it really wasn't something that happened between guys. In some, you danced around it or you avoided it, or you found different ways to relate and to connect. So yeah, I think we're kind of that, again, that expectation is typical, and it's also societal, that, guys don't talk about this stuff. Guys joke around and wrestle each other and play sports together and compete with each other, and that's how we relate, and that's how we connect, and all that stuff is great, and you do learn a lot, and you develop some great things from that. But we're definitely taught to avoid talking about feeling feelings, and even if we do recognize and feel them, we don't necessarily feel that it's okay, and it starts to become a feeling of shame. So even though we are holding it in, it's also how we internalize those feelings at the same time. So yeah, I mean, just not having that relationship with your father, which is obviously where if you're lucky enough to have a relationship with your father, if that kind of emotional connection and that emotional intimacy isn't there, that's your initial attachment to other males, and that's how you learn it's supposed to be. And I think that's hardwired into us when our brains have that high level of neuroplasticity when we're kids. We just learn that that's the way it is, and we go through life that way, and experiences continue to build on each other and reinforce themselves. So the first time you go to school and somebody calls you a stupid idiot, you're not allowed to get sad about that, as much as it might scare you or make you sad. Like if you cry, you hear about it, right? And whereas I think, if and obviously it's not black and white, but there's a little bit more understanding and acceptance if a girl cries. Like, okay, that's going to happen. But for, because of these expectations, and they are starting to, like you mentioned, unravel a lot more in 2020. But we're talking about 30 years ago. It's different. It was different then, and even different before then when our fathers were going through it. So feeling those things and expressing them and talking about it, forget it. Forget about it. You couldn't do that. It wasn't okay. And not only did it get stuck, but it made you feel bad for feeling that way. So it just compounded on itself. And I think, that's what I mean by we learn to be tough, to numb ourselves, and that being afraid is not okay. And being tough means ignore things and just keep going.
I think about, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's cool. Go for
it. I think about, I think about this a lot, and maturity's a lot different now. With the feelings and the things that go through my brain at 35 years old. When my father was 35 years old, I was 5.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, I just had a breakdown the other day because, I'm not bringing the income in that I used to bring in. I'm running 2 brands. I'm on TikTok. Like, what the hell is that? My dad wasn't doing any of that crap, Yeah. And so it really, yes, we've learned so much. We've done so much, all these great things. It's really just a unique thing. And you talked about something interesting, the difference between men and women and how they can express that. And I actually have a different situation. So you said men can get around and men can be physical and we play sport. Absolutely. You learn a lot from a dude in silence. If you're a sports guy playing sports, whether wrestling, lacrosse, you and I played football together. We had a blast. And we always, I think, had good conversations. I had a partner once who I could barely speak to. And I said to her, we don't really talk, And she said, yeah, but we're so expressive in bed, and it's so physical. And I said, that's not really okay. That's not really, so sure. So now it's okay. It's okay for men to say, well, we don't talk and that's all right. But the minute you bring it to a man and a female, it's not okay. So that needs to go back to the other side and say, well, if it's not okay for your lover, it shouldn't be okay for your best bud. Right.
100%. Yeah. And I think you touch on an interesting point that I think also kind of permeates our expectations and our culture of, since we are taught not to, we don't know how, and we're taught if this is how we learn to cope, we're taught to avoid emotional intimacy. But then we go and have a partner, and we're obviously connected to this person, and we care about them. And the only place we can find that intimacy is through sex, right? So, and that becomes how we seek and express and receive love. So, that typical guys only care about one thing, and, guys always going out and just looking for the next girl to have sex with, et cetera, et cetera. How much of that comes from that inability to emotionally connect, and the fact that we are actually starving for that emotional intimacy that we never really received or were able to receive and process growing up. And the only way we know how to find it and express it is through sex. So we compulsively do that.
Right.
And I think that's a big driving force behind that isn't always talked about or recognized.
Absolutely. So I want to jump into some bigger stuff, but I also want to. I have a silly question for you. So you've always been, I remember, long hair, long beard. How much of your style right now is COVID, and how much is it? Because this is more hair than I've ever had.
Yeah. My hair comes and goes. The beard and the hair comes and goes, but it had been a while since I had cut my hair anyway.
Right.
And I was getting to a point where I was like, all right, maybe I need like a little maintenance. And then this happened, and it's like, well, I guess we're going to keep going. So,
I had a conversation with my barber just before, literally like the week before the lockdown, and she said, well, we'll keep it long. I know you want to keep it long. And we were trying something on the top, and she was, you could always come back and I'll do it for free. And literally like lockdown 3 days later.
Right.
But yeah, you've always had, different varying lengths of beard. You'll have to tell, my girl wants me to grow my beard out. So tell her it's gross and it's painful, please. So we know where you are now, right? And just, if you could real quick, all these things, CrossFit, Brooklyn Fitness, all these different things. If you had to give me your, if you only had like a Twitter account, what would you call yourself?
Yeah, I guess it's strength and conditioning coach, trainer, that's kind of thing,
And I'm not trying to put you in a box. I'm trying to,
Yeah. Professionally, ultimately, that would be what my title would be, and doing a mixture of things from like group classes to one-on-one classes to remote training where I'm just writing people's workouts and they're doing it on their own, and that kind of feedback goes back and forth via that. But ultimately, it's the strength and conditioning world in various formats.
But to have a coach like you who is so in tune, that post is, and I'm not trying, that post is indicative of who you are as a human, right? That's just who you are. You're an intuitive guy. Mental health is important to you. So we've talked about a couple things. We've talked about where you are with that post, and we've talked about where we came from. How did you get here? Right? What steps did you take mentally and physically? I know growing up, I saw a therapist, and I hope it's okay to disclose. I know that you saw a therapist a little bit younger than other folks as well. And I remember going, well, if Keith does it, so just anybody who's watching, Keith was a cool kid growing up. And then I don't know why he wanted to hang out with me, but he did. And so I was like, all right, well, if Keith, we were tight for years. And so I thought, well, if Keith is a cool kid and he gets to go and he's seeing a therapist once in a while, I guess it's all right. So can you walk us through how you went from, blue collar family growing up, of generations and generations of not talking about, and by the way, if my dad's listening, or if Mr. Bear Wickler is listening, this is not a slight on you. It's just not what we did, right? It's 2020 now. I don't know how I'm going to talk to my son or daughter. It's going to be very different. How did you get from where you were there to being able to be so intuitive about mental health and open about yourself and with others?
Learning the hard way, to be honest with you, unfortunately. But, at the same time, I like to say that I'm grateful for having all of those experiences and having had the opportunity to go through them and now learn from them, recognize it, and be able to move on it and have dialogues like this. I grew up since I was a little kid, was super hyperactive and just interested in everything and couldn't wait to do everything and had questions about everything and couldn't sit still and was like, just wanted to do, learn, and experience everything. And like we've talked about, coming from blue collar families, we've got parents that are working a lot. I had a younger brother who was only a year younger than me, an older brother who's 10 years older. So he's a teenager when I'm kind of coming of age.
Practically a second father, right?
Right. Yeah. So what I experienced a lot growing up was, my parents not really knowing what to do with me. And my dad being a little bit demonstrative of him not knowing what to do with me and vocalizing those kind of things, right?
Kind of a cry for help.
Yeah, for real, right? Because, and again, this is how it's generational. He didn't know how to deal with his frustrations and anxiety, so they would come out in these unhealthy ways. And then I, being, you know, like a young, sensitive but very aware little kid, are internalizing this as well. If my caretaker, the person who provides everything and protects me and knows everything and is like the greatest person in the world, doesn't know what to do with me, well, there must be something. I'm just too much. There's something wrong with me, right?
I'm too something.
Yeah, I'm just like, man, I'm really fucking this up. You know, I gotta tone it down. I gotta chill out, whatever. So, you know, you go through life, and everybody experiences positive and negative aspects of life, but because that tone was kind of set, I think I went through a lot. You know, if something happened at school, or if I didn't succeed at something, it was just internalized as that, well, that's because this is what I've always known, that there's something wrong with me. So, you know, let me just kind of move through life accepting that that's the way it's going to be.
Right.
So it just makes all the negative things that happen to you in life that much harder to say, okay, this happened, and it's okay, and it's not indicative of who I am. It's just something that happened, and I'm going to move forward and learn from it. I think because that was set, everything that happened I internalized as, well, yeah, that's because you're a problem child, right? And you end up, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You put yourself in those positions. You become comfortable being the bad kid, the kid who doesn't do what he's supposed to do, the kid who's in trouble all the time. And the more that happens, and when you're not able to recognize that and express it and talk about it, it just builds on itself. And we're not taught, we're not equipped to deal with that. Nobody really is. So, you know, by the time I get into my 30s and whatever, relationship stuff, career stuff, I'm self-sabotaging left and right and not even realizing it, because I was taught from day one, well, yeah, because, you know, you're doing something wrong and that's why this is happening. So I guess I just got to a point where I was like, I keep like fighting and struggling to get myself where I want to be. And then seeing the pattern of like stuff going wrong and me hitting rock bottom. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. This is ridiculous. I need to make a change. So as scary as it was, I started really digging in, and I had always thought I was kind of an introspective person. And I, like you said, I've been in therapy for a long time. So I thought I was doing all that work. But I guess I got to a tipping point where I was like, no, I'm going to, in figuratively, lock myself down, dig in, and just go internal and figure all this stuff out. And that was a super painful, super scary, super stressful, overwhelming experience, but something that was necessary for sure.
100%. And yeah. I think that when we do that, and when we see those patterns, we love the highs, right? The highs are great, and we go, "This is great, this is great, this is great," and then we get the lows, and we completely forget that it was probably that high pattern that we've been repeating over and over and over that was shallow as hell, right?
Yeah.
Because we loved it during the good time, but if you really thought about it, you probably knew it was going to happen anyway. You talk a lot about patterns, and I remember my father saying, you know, we talk about anxieties that our family had, and he used to say, you know, you kids are killing me. I get this little rubber band in my head, and when it snaps, I just go crazy with you guys. And I thought to myself, what a psycho. And then, you know, maybe like a year or so ago, I'm talking about my dog, Joker, and I said, and I verbatim, I didn't even remember that I had this conversation as a kid, and I said, it's like this little rubber band in my brain, and it's twisting. I'm trying to be good, and then all of a sudden it snaps, you know, and there's the pattern. So I want to jump into a lot of things. We're a little bit over for our break, so I want to take a quick break, everybody, and just for you, Keith, so that you know, and for everybody else who's been listening in, we've got a lot of listeners. This is for our radio show down in Florida. We need to just do a quick 10-second break so that they can insert ads. So We're just going to be quiet for a second.
Cool.
Okay, and we're back. This is WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Christopher Salute. You're at the barbershop. I'm with one of my dear friends, Keith Van Winkler, and I've got to be honest, I thought we were on for like 3 minutes. We were on for like 25 minutes. Keith is one of the most eloquent guys that I've known for a long time. I've always vibed with him. He's a great guy. I'm through question 2 in our 10 questions of the night, so we probably won't get through them all. But and I want to encourage everyone too. There's a lot of folks watching on Keith. I know some of Keith's friends, some of our friends. This is not a 2-person show, so if you've got a question, feel free to chime in. I want to jump in specifically to the topic of the show, if that's okay with you, Keith.
Yeah, man.
We are in, the most unprecedented, I'm not going to get into it, right? It's a crazy time, right?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about this for years. It's wild. You specialize both you specialize in physical health professionally, but I think mental health, is one of your strong suits as just a coach and a leader. What are some of the things that in your experience, we'll start with the physical side since that's where your profession is, that COVID has started to alter and change about the way we've treated ourselves physically lately?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into that, just with the routine breaking, and obviously the biggest thing and the thing that I deal with the most is people not having their gym to go to. And it's definitely challenging if you're used to a gym or a location or, a team or a dance troupe or whatever it is that you do to get your exercise. Most people, it's a location thing. Obviously there are people who are runners who just run. There are some people who do work out at home already, but those of us who've lost kind of the socially intertwined community intertwined, right? And that's obviously huge in CrossFit gyms, which is where I kind of live at. But really for all of us, and we don't realize how inactive, even depending on what kind of job you have and where you live and stuff like that, but how inactive we actually become when we don't have an external stimulus, how much sitting we actually do and how much that changes things. And also obviously the implication of physical health and that we're dealing with an illness here. We're dealing with a disease, right? So how much is your immune system supporting you and protecting you from that? And I'm certainly not like advocating that we don't need medicine to protect ourselves from it. But we definitely do put ourselves in a better position to fight off, and in case we do happen to come down with this thing, to be in a better position to fight it off. So it really does put a microscope on it in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, just kind of changing what they normally do, and at the same time kind of making it that much more important that you are actually physically healthy. So it's challenging for sure.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about community. So I haven't found it out here in Vegas, but I was in Taekwondo and MMA for the better part of a decade in New York. And, I'm not, recently I started to cleanse a little bit, and I've started to do I've had some real issues with my food. I've created some videos with it. I've lost a little bit of weight, not intentionally. It was really more of an energy thing. But I've noticed my arms have gotten smaller, not being into the gym and things of that nature. But really, I love the community that I was in New York, because, you're about to punch somebody in the face on a Friday night. Like you look forward to it, and then you go out and you get food after, you get a slice of pizza, whatever. It's not about. To the people who work out and run by themselves and have a lift by themselves, I envy you. For me, it's not that way. I love seeing the people that I see. I love going. As much as I'll complain to my girlfriend later about the naked guys in the sauna, I love having the chuckle, and we talk about cool stuff, So it's definitely so mental as well. So I know personally, I've bought a bunch of cinder blocks and rocks, and I'm landscaping my house. I'm pulling weeds. I'm trying to do anything I possibly can to do this. What are some suggestions? Let's jump into the physical thing. What can we do physically at home? And then I want to talk about mental health as well. But what can we do physically at home that, look, I'm never going to get the CrossFit experience at home.
Sure.
Or maybe I can. I don't know. Maybe you'll tell me. But what can I start doing to get back into my cycle or close to it?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is expectations, right? And this ties into the mental health part of it too, but and really everything that we're doing right now. A lot of us are under the impression that, or at least there's an expectation out there that's like, oh, I have all this free time now, so that means that I should be so much more productive. I should be getting involved in all these hobbies. I should be doing all of these things. I should be cooking all this great food, and that's just not a realistic expectation for most people to put on themselves. And I think fitness ends up being one of those things where people are like, I need to keep up with the fitness level or whatever, or replace whatever it is that I was doing, or else everything's going to be horrible. And the reality is that through this thing, like, this is not normal. And we're not necessarily planning for this to be the rest of our lives. So whatever you can do to just move and stay okay is good, right? You should be happy with yourself for doing that. I think there's a lot of pressure right now and I especially see it in like the CrossFit world. They're like, oh, I'm losing my ability to do X, Y, Z. And people will have a lot of stress and anxiety around that. And that just goes again with that expectation of being like, we're going through a really messed up time, and this is a really traumatic thing. Like, you just have to do what you can, right? And I think if people have fallen out of their routine and trying to get back into it, I think the all or nothing thing is a big problem right now too, with trying to make that change. And the best thing that you can do is just do a little bit every day, right? Yeah. If you're not working out at all, say, I'm going to work out 2 days this week. Does that seem realistic? Yes. Okay, great. Do that. Be happy. Be proud of yourself that you did that. That's awesome. Mm-hmm. If you feel good about that, great. Next week, say, okay, maybe now I can try 3.
Right.
Maybe now I can try 4. And maybe that's just 45 minutes of, just running or just walking.
Or even just stretching, right? Like,
just getting yourself moving.
Killing me.
100%.
And I don't know if my special human's on the air tonight, but I said to her, I said, I don't feel well. My body, at the gym, I have all this great stuff, and this, just so you know, too, if anybody's listening who doesn't have the mobility that we have and doesn't want to work, that we're not saying that you have to work out, but for me, that's a part of my day. It's a part of my life.
Right.
And so it was important to me. And so I said to my special human, hey, I don't have the mobility I want. My back's hurting. I'm trying to pull some weeds. And so she calls me now. I love her. She calls me every morning and she wakes me up and she goes, let's stretch. And sometimes she stretches in, something skimpier in the nude, and that motivates me a little bit more to wake up and do it. But yeah, I mean, it's just to get up and get that stretching. So I'm sorry, keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Whatever it is for you, that is movement and that works for you and is something, that's gonna be better, obviously, than doing nothing. So it's those small wins and those small steps, and start with the path of least resistance, right? And just try and build little by little, instead of trying to be like, okay, this is the week starting this Monday, I'm starting this new crazy regimen and I'm going to train 6 days a week for 4 hours, and like, that's not sustainable, right? And it's honestly, stress. Another aspect of this is stress, right? And we think about exercise and all these physical things as a stress reliever, okay? Yeah. But when you train and if you train hard, you are putting a stress on your body, and it's a wanted stress, because the idea is stress your body so that it can learn that you want it to be better prepared to do that again in the future, right? That's what training is, right? It's an adaptation. And that's something that people lose track of, is that a workout is only as good as you can recover from it, right? And what's going to be consistent and you're going to be able to sustain. So overloading yourself and running yourself into the ground, all that's going to do is beat you up and make you not want to continue doing it. And it's going to be too much for you to sustain, and then you're going to be back to square one. Right? So it's just picking that thing that's fun for you, that's easy for you, the amount of time or day that you can really commit to and really keep. You start there. And then once that becomes habit or that becomes easy or automatic, then you take another step. Okay, now I'm going to add another day, or now I'm going to add, now I'm going to start using the dumbbell that I have in my basement, or riding my bike that I haven't touched in weeks, or whatever it is.
Right.
You take those small steps. That's going to make it much more manageable, much more effective and sustainable, which is really what's most important. Not the intensity or the specific exercise that you're doing, but that you're able to do it consistently going forward.
Yeah, we talked about you said specifically in the beginning of the show, kind of your mental health coming as a product of making a lot of mistakes. And I would say, I wouldn't even say 9 times out of 10. I would say 100 times out of 100, I teach from my own mistakes. I have one of the best editors-in-chief in the world for Bold Magazine. I've just appointed her so that I can focus on other projects. And I like to think that I'm teaching her a little bit on the business side and how to sell. And I would imagine that at some point she would think to herself, well, how does he know these things? And I've literally screwed up every possible business you could possibly screw up. And now I've gotten to a point where I know how to sell pretty well. I know how to make financial decisions and things of that nature. And we're at this same crux here in COVID. And I think that a lot of us have seen this evolution, and maybe you can comment on it. Everyone read those memes, like you said. If you're not coming out of this quarantine learning 3 languages with your book deal and then you wasted your time. And that's how I thought. I have a book I've got to write. My publisher, is wonderful and has been very understanding. I was learning Spanish, and certain days I would stay up till 2 a.m. and I would learn and I would write and I would try to work out and I would do these things and I would build my business. I'd build a website. And then the next day it's like, all right, even if I wake up at close to a normal time, like 8 a.m., which is a little late for me, it's like it takes me till 2 o'clock in the afternoon to be productive because I just crashed. And then if I did anything, it was just talk about how depressed I was.
Yeah.
At some point, somewhere in there, I started dialing in and I started doing a little bit at a time. And now for the past couple of days, I've been really keen on being intuitive, listening to my body, getting the work that needs to get done. I had a cigar last night. So talk about how do these types of processes, if you can, whether it be the physical or the pressure we set on ourselves, how are these things linked? How are they affecting us mentally during this crisis? In your opinion, because I know you're not a mental health professional.
Yeah, sure. This is something that I actually have spoken to a few people about more recently, and how it is actually, it was actually my therapist kind of posed it to me this way, and it was really effective and insightful for me because it does tie directly to the physical in kind of an analogous way. In that, like I just mentioned, when you train, you put a stress on your body, and you want it to be the right stress that's hard, but not so hard so that your body can then recover from it and come back stronger or fitter or whatever it is, right? And it's very easy for us from a mental health perspective or from a career perspective or any of that to think similarly as we would in the gym that we have to go 7 days a week, 110% effort all the time, blah, 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 right? And that's just not real. And that goes for your mental health work, your self-care, whatever it is that you're doing. That goes for your book that you're trying to write, whatever it is. You have diminishing returns the more you push to that point, right? We all have a capacity. And once we get past that capacity, we're not doing anything, again, that's sustainable or recoverable, or that's adaptable for us, right? So whether it's your physical health or your mental health or something you're trying to achieve, there has to be that exceeding of what's comfortable or what's easy. And then there has to be that kind of pullback where you absorb the change or the gains, as we say, or the adaptation that's going to allow you to be better, stronger, faster, smarter, healthier, whatever it is going forward. It can't just be foot on the gas all the time. And that goes for both training and again, whatever mental health it is that you're trying or self-care that you're trying to do. You can't meditate 24 hours a day.
Right.
You can't journal 24 hours. So you got to just go chill and do something that you enjoy, whether it's having a cigar, whether it's just playing music, whether it's just watching a movie, right? That stuff is necessary for us to absorb all of the work that we put in so that we can actually adapt to it and have it become part of us going forward.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think it really stemmed from, and I don't know if this is something that you meant to bring up, but before this happened, right, generationally, people talk about the millennials being, failures. you're talking about Generation Z. Those are the people at the beach. Millennials are pretty driven.
Yeah.
So when people say millennials, it's been like 20 years since we've been in college. So
yeah.
Millennial talk. We are actually very driven. In fact, it's our anxiety makes us driven, and there's something in us that also, and this is not necessarily a good thing. I had about 40 minutes between I had a tutoring session today. I was helping my roommate get some cable, get his cable set up, and prepping for the show. And I thought to myself, well, what can I do? What can I do in 40 minutes? And I'm taking a certification course that I signed up for Nevada State, and I just start clicking through it, and I start getting productive. And I go, this is a sickness. Like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
Every minute of our days, and it comes from, I think, I'm sure if I looked in your basement, you've got 75 trophies, right? Whether you were mathletes and volleyball and football and lacrosse and all these other things, it comes from that. But at some point, you're right. It's not sustainable to drive and go. You have to keep, you have to push. Now that leads me to something, and I didn't send this question to you in advance, but it's okay. I want to bring it up to you. I am an uber extrovert, and I think you probably are pretty extroverted as well, but I don't know how on that dial you are. There is this community that you're missing out in CrossFit. I just spoke to a student today. He's doing his coach started soccer practice today online. They're doing soccer practice via Zoom. What do you tell to folks who say, all right, the physical part's cool, but I really miss my community? What have you been doing?
So this actually brings me to a really interesting point that's something that I've been focusing in my own stuff through this. And I think it's really useful, especially for single people or people who live alone, who aren't with a family or with a partner, is yes, we need human interaction and it's important to connect. But like you brought up, especially our generation or any generation of people that are living now with the way things are, we don't know how to do nothing. Right. And we don't know how to be alone. We don't know how to be without stimulus, right? So when we're seeking comfort, when we're seeking love, when we're seeking support, when we're seeking engagement, we are always looking out, right? We are looking for another person or another thing to give that to us. And we feel that loneliness and lack of productivity or just sitting still, we view that as a negative thing, right? So if we start sitting still and we start feeling lonely, we think that's something that we have to solve, right? When it's actually not. It's just a state of being that exists and is very normal. So the term that I've kind of come up with is when you start, especially in the situation we're in now, is facing yourself, right? And we think about face yourself, meaning take a look in the mirror and tell yourself to do it and you can do it and all these things. And what I'm talking about is saying, like, I feel lonely, I don't feel supported, or I feel like sad or whatever. You should be able to provide that support and that love for yourself. And a lot of us don't know how to do that, right? So if you're looking in the mirror, or I use the term facing yourself, stop looking externally for all of these things, right? And find them in yourself. Then being lonely and being bored is really not so bad. And then you can actually find positives to being lonely and being bored and doing the things that you actually want to do. You're not hearing these voices from other people or getting these influences from other people. You're actually learning who you actually are and the things that you actually want to do. And you can actually feel when you need to take a break or when you feel like I'm going to be productive now, right? So that's something that I've been, I think, successful with and has made this a lot easier for me. Living alone in a small apartment in New York City, where there's not, and I'm used to having this huge community that I work with every day. And that all of a sudden not being there is when I start feeling that kind of angst and that loneliness, being like, finding it in myself, whatever it is that I'm looking for from this external stimulus, seeing if I can find it in myself. And there have been times, and this is goofy as hell to try and do, but I've looked in the mirror and told myself I love you. And it's a wild thing to do. I mean, I had a lot of trouble with it at first. But it's amazing what kind of effect that can have on you. Something as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kristen, we're going to get to your question. I've got it up here. And I also want to shout out, Valentina says hi. Hi, Valentina. You're wonderful. I'll read Kristen's question in a second. It's a really good question.
Yeah.
But to touch on that, I mean, that's super important. So I actually put out a couple of videos a couple of weeks this past week about my relationship to my body and my relationship to food, and caught a little heat, got some folks who were really excited about it as well. And in that video, talked about, I was crying a little bit. I talked about, self-abuse that I had gone through and body hatred. And then to the point where I got a couple of years ago where I just said, fuck it. I love myself. I love myself.
Yeah.
And there used to be a point, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well. I would look in the mirror, physically look in the mirror, and some days I would go, who the hell are you? I find that's happening less and less because I'm very in tune with who I am. And for anybody who's listening, I certainly, I solve my own problem for sure. I do that uber extrovert thing to prompt the question. And my special human is wonderful, but she doesn't provide me with anything that she's the sprinkles on my ice cream, right? So yeah. I am the ice cream.
Yeah.
Do you find that? Do you find that do you find you ask yourself who you are less and less?
Yeah. And I think it's easy when we don't do those things to have several voices or points of view pulling us in a different way. And it's very hard to differentiate which one is actually us and which one is our patterns and which one is the pressures that we're feeling from this person or that person, or where we feel like we need to compensate for a certain thing.
What I'm supposed to be.
Right. And when we're able to separate the I should be doing this, I'm supposed to do this. And when we can separate from that, right, we gain that clarity to know what's coming from us. And I think what you just touched on is something that I've, worked through a lot lately and been paying attention to, is how we get into relationships and we seek those things, right? And that's where kind of that codependency comes from, where we're trying to find that comfort and that love and that validation from somebody else. And then there are people who are in a position where, like, I'm going to do everything I can to provide that for this person so that they never leave me.
Right.
And it's all it all comes from insecurity and this kind of, and trauma and past patterning and stuff like that. So if we have a second to go through this, I think is a really good kind of analogous or model for that kind of thing. Right. And so if I take my fist like this and put it to where people can see it, right? And you can do this with me, you'll kind of get the feel for it. And I think about everything that I'm nervous and scared and afraid of, and I clench it into that fist, right? And I take my fingers and I try and pry those fingers open. What happens? I clench even tighter, right? Nothing happens. I actually clench tighter.
Right.
But what happens when I take my other hand and I just kind of cradle that fist really softly and just kind of support it? My fist kind of automatically starts to loosen up, right?
That's cool.
So this is us when we don't love ourselves, when we can't support ourselves, when we don't have that kind of relationship with ourselves, and we're tight and we can't really let anybody in and we can't do anything. As soon as we learn how to appreciate and support ourselves, that loosens up, right? And now my hand is open and I'm supporting myself. And now I'm in a place where I could get into a relationship with somebody else who is also doing the same thing, has this open hand, but is supporting themselves. And all we would do is link fingers, right?
Right.
So now we're connected. And if I need help, maybe I start to fall, they might pull me up or I might pull them up. But ultimately, I'm supporting myself, they're supporting themselves, and we're linked at the same time. Right? What tends to happen is, like, let's say I'm a person who can't find that in myself. So I'm just this person. I find a person who's like, oh, let me support you, right? So imagine this is somebody else's hand. They go, yeah, I'm going to be your support for you.
Great. It's so easy.
Right? And I'm also going to try and get you to open up. So I'm going to take my other hand and I'm going to start prying your fingers open, right? And now that other person is supporting us and themselves, and they're also smothering us at the same time.
Yeah.
They don't even realize they're doing it, right? And how does that serve them? Oh, they're just being nice. They're just helping us. They're doing it. No. They've got us here, and they've got us here. We're not fucking going anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how they want it, right?
Right.
But that's not a healthy dynamic, right? Now what happens when I'm like, well, cool, now I feel supported. Now I want to grow and expand and do fun things. They're like, nope, you're not going to do that because I got you.
Right.
And that's when we start going, and you and me have talked about this. We've both experienced this in relationships.
Yep.
We start to go like this. Hey, no.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull away from this. I'm going to avoid this. And what is their reaction?
Right.
Come back.
Yeah.
Right. And you start that push-pull thing. So how do we find a healthy relationship is by taking this angst and this fear and this loneliness and this tense fist that we have and taking our own hand and saying, no, I got you. I'm here for you. I love you. I support you. And
to yourself.
To myself, right? And now I'm a healthy, supported, open person who can now engage in a healthy relationship.
That is, did you make that up?
Yeah.
That's. I mean, I know you're smart, but that's brilliant. So I know we're coming up on the hour. I know Cece's going to start yelling at me. We have a great question I want to ask you, Keith, and then we'll close out.
Cool.
Kristen asks, workout question. My roommate is in a cycle of working out. I'm worried he's hurting his body instead of helping it. He's working out 4 times a day, and then he talks about how much he hurts all over, can't walk between working out, and this is pretty normal for him. And when he's in a workout spiral, he's doing what the whole I have to lose weight and work out while I can because COVID, so he has the time to do it. Is this normal to be in that much pain? What can I say to him?
Definitely. Well, normal versus good.
Right.
Yes, I see or have seen this, especially in CrossFit or functional fitness or whatever world, a lot. And it is ultimately, in a lot of ways, an addiction to exercise and this feeling that, like he's saying, I need to do this.
Right.
Even though it's because I need to lose weight, et cetera, et cetera. First of all, it's not effective. And second of all, the motivation for it is probably not coming from the healthiest place, right? But if we want to stick with just the physical part of it, yes, you should definitely, nobody should be working out 4 days a week or 4 times a day. Nobody. Okay. Especially if it's 7 days a week. And like we talked about, you need to recover and be able to adapt from the training that you're doing. And once you pass that capacity and you don't allow yourself to recover, you're actually, hurting yourself, right? And if we talk about cortisol levels and hormones and stuff like that, this guy is in so much pain and his body is so stressed. His stress response is so high. He's actually stopping himself from being able to lose weight. It's counterintuitive, but he's essentially overtraining, which puts yourself, burns out your adrenals and just puts you in that high stress state all the time. So your body doesn't have resources to get healthier. And what is it going to do? If it's stressed, it's going to store weight because it feels like it's constantly under attack and it actually needs to hold on to that weight, right? So without getting crazy scientific, he's overdoing it. Rome was not built in a day, essentially, right? However long this COVID thing goes on, he could work out 4 days a week for 3 months, 4 times a day for 3 months and lose a bunch of weight. Guess what happens when he goes back to normal life?
Right.
That's not a sustainable thing, right? And we talked in the beginning of the show about small steps, sustainable things, and things that you can actually be consistent with. And that goes for the physical, mental, career, whatever. So yeah, tell him to chill. Basically.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Kristen, for that question. That was really intuitive. That was great. However, if you have a book to finish, if it's done by COVID, then it is sustainable. So that's okay. It's very interesting that you bring that up because it's the same thing mentally, right? So
yes.
we do this where we push ourselves to the limit and we say there's 24 usable hours in a day. While COVID's going on, I'll sleep 5 and I'll do this and I'll do that. Or even let's forget COVID, right? I'm going to push myself and push myself and push myself. Most CEOs, most, very, very wealthy people, they don't, right? They read hundreds of books a year. They do spend time on self-care because it allows them, when they do think and make a decision, it allows them to make a smarter decision. And I think the same thing you're saying physically is you need to, there were times in working out for, MMA or Taekwondo, I'd bust a knee, I'd bust an ankle, which, I'm prone to.
Yeah.
And that was the best thing that could happen for me, knock on wood, I hope it doesn't happen, but it forced me to take a week or two off, and the rest of my body felt better. And when I got back into it, I just was in a better mental state.
Yeah.
So I don't want to upset Cece. We're gonna hit the hour. I'll be honest with you, Keith. I could do this all day, and I came into this very frazzled. I was trying to set up my cable for my roommate, and I didn't even prepare the way I normally do. And I feel like we can talk for 3 hours, but we can't, unfortunately. I have one question that I always ask my guests, and maybe we'll have you on again. And I want to clarify before I ask it to you. For anyone who's listening, I ask my guests, what makes you a man? For my bold folks, I ask them what makes them bold. And for my men, I ask them what makes them a man. And when I say what makes you a man, we've touched on this already. I'm not asking you what makes you masculine, right? Yeah. I'm asking you what makes you, what makes you your beautiful, unique butterfly teddy bear self, whatever it is that we're going to talk about. So Keith, that said, what makes you a man?
I think it's a relationship with fear, and typically we think of being fearless as being courageous or having courage, right? And nobody is actually fearless, right? People are afraid, but what courage is, and what, in that stereotypical be a man thing, courage is being afraid and doing it anyway. And leaning into those challenges. So I think just being able to, when there is a problem that needs to be solved, even though it's going to be hard and challenging, just knowing that that's what has to be done and doing it anyway, even though the fear is there. I think that kind of ties into that post that we were talking about. And what that allows you to do is ultimately be yourself, unapologetically, gain that freedom to not be afraid of, just know that, it's scary to put yourself out there. It's scary to do things that are going to be hard. But the freedom that comes with that is well worth whatever kind of negative feedback you might get or experience that you might have. And you ultimately learn from it either way.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. I can stop flex. I've been flexing for 57 minutes because I know Keith's a pretty big guy, so I'll chill out now. You've been just an amazing guest. I could do this for hours and hours and hours. It was absolutely incredible to catch up with you, Keith. We need to do it when the cameras aren't rolling as well.
Yeah, man, for sure.
For those who are just tuning in for the first time, if you're one of Keith's followers or fans or buddies or family members, this is WGSN Radio, WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio. My name is Dr. Christopher Salute. You're watching The Barbershop, where we talk about men's issues every other week. Every other week, we've got Think It Twice with my buddy, 2 times twice, coming on next week. He couldn't make it out today. His mom got on his case about driving without a back tail light. So it just goes to show, I don't care how old you are, you listen to mom. And he knows this too. And I'll say this for you then. I always wear cologne, and I make myself look pretty when I see Twice. So you got good smelling Christopher today. But for anybody else who was listening, thank you so much for listening. Keith, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. This was honestly one of the best shows we've ever had. Please check out Keith. We'll post some of his social medias up on there. If you're in Brooklyn, check him out. He's always been a brilliant health and fitness guy, but also a brilliant guy as well, and just a good guy to know. So thanks so much, Keith, for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, man. It was great.
No problem. And for everybody else, be bold, be yourself, stay safe, stay healthy, and thanks so much for being with us. Thanks a lot, guys.